So it's been about half an hour, and you may wonder, why does the dough have to sit? Well, the dough, like we saw, is made up of flour and water, and those two have to come together and rehydrate, so you have one solid piece that's not part flour, part water. And as I feel this, it feels good. It feels a little tiny bit sticky, but we'll deal with that. So let's consider the dough. I'm going to put a little flour on, because the next part that we're going to do is start putting it through this roller. So we're going to just press it out, and then you have to decide how many you're going to cut it into. I'm going to cut this into 4. You can always cut it more later. Now, this is the moment when you find out how the dough actually is. You take it, squeeze it. Now, when we put this through this, we're going to put it through the number 1, which is the widest one. And really what we're doing is we're kneading the dough, because we want to make sure that it's smooth, because otherwise it will fall apart as it gets thinner. So we're going to take this dough, we're going to put it through, and then we're going to put it through again. And when I feel it, this is something you just learn this with practice. This is not something that comes automatically. When you feel the dough, it shouldn't feel like it's sticking at all. And mine's sticking a tiny bit. So what I'm going to do is give it a little bit of flour. Oops. Fold it up again and put it back through. Now when I'm doing a lot of pasta, my husband stands here and he turns that. So now we put this through. I'm going to put it through one more time, and it's no longer feeling sticky. So what we're going to do, that goes through one more time, and lay it down. Just put a little flour on it, and let that guy sit. You want to make sure that your dough doesn't dry out. So I use a thin tablecloth, and that stays there while we move on to a second piece. And what I'm going to do is 2 pieces, and then we can sort of compare and see how they look. This one's been kneaded and this one hasn't. So you can begin to see the difference between the two. This is not hard to turn. If it's hard to turn, there's something wrong with your dough, or you're using too thick a piece of dough. I want to see if you can tell the difference between these two. This one feels very smooth, and this one still is slightly bumpy, which means it needs to be kneaded more. So we'll go back and knead this second one a little more. This is the crucial time when you're working on the dough, because if you don't get it right now, as you try to make it thinner and thinner, it'll catch and it'll shred. And that's what usually throws most people when they make dough, is they think, oh no, it's a disaster, I can't do it. So, we've got these two. These two I'm just going to set aside because we don't have to work on all of them now. If you have leftover dough, you can't keep it in the fridge for any more than the same day. There are eggs in it and they'll go bad. If you really want to keep dough, put it in the freezer. So let's go back to our original one. Now we're going to see how this is if we can put it through the whole thing. So I'm going to cut it in half, because as I said, it gets longer as it gets thinner. So we're going to put this, we're going to do one more fold. We're going to put it through one more time. And then we're going to move on to 2. It went through 2 fine, no problems. Try 3. Fine, no breaking, no tearing. At this point, if you have any concern, you can always put a little flour on it. 4. 5. Now this is the time when it begins to get much longer and you have to catch it from underneath. But you can see, there's no holes in it, there's no problems with it. We're going to go for 6. Let's see what happens. And see, we shouldn't have gone for 6. See this dough? See that dough? It's shredded. What you can do is you can just, in this case, I can just stop. But if this happens, we're just going to run this through, because this is the disaster that everybody worries about. We've got this long piece of dough, but it looks like thin Swiss cheese, right? What are we going to do with that? Well, I have had this experience more than once, and here's what you do. You start over. You take this dough. What this is a sign of is this dough was a little wet. So you take that dough, give it a little bit of flour, and miracle of miracles, it will be fine. You just start over. You put it through one, fold it, because you want to get all those little bits back together. Two. And this time it's feeling silkier. We've added a little flour, and it's also had a little kneading, which makes it silkier. 4. 5. So you can see this dough is perfectly fine. A little bit on the center. So let's move on to the second half. We're going to give it a little more flour because we know that it was a little wet. And we're going to hide this underneath so it stays moist. And now we'll run this one through. Go all the way back to 1. If you are interested in a fast meal, do not make fresh pasta. It's great if you make the pasta ahead and maybe you make ravioli, which you can freeze. But to say, oh, let's just whip together some pasta for dinner, you're probably just going to be sorry. Because if it doesn't turn, if you have a problem, then you're going to get angry. Pasta is for when you have some time and you put on some music and you enjoy it. It's part of slow cooking, not fast cooking. And there we have another one on 5. Now I'm going to let this one sit, and I'm going to come back in a few minutes and try that on the last one to see if it'll work this time. But as I said, for most dishes, you don't want pasta that's, ready to go? You don't want pasta that's that thin. So here we have the pasta that we did a little earlier, and let's look at a couple things we can do with it.